Parliament is in the full swing of things, and I have the pleasure this week to break down some of the madness that's been going on, talking about the digital identity bill, talking about online censorship, talking about maybe the voice to Parliament as well with Senator Antic. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Joel, thanks for having me. It's a big ticket list of items there, but we'll get through it. We'll do our best.
I don't know how you do it. I mean, did you experience any cuts to your parliamentary stuff? I know some of the crossbenchers did in the Senate, but I don't know how you guys managed to get across all of that work. I think in the last parliamentary sitting, there was something like 50,000 pages of reading the senators had to do.
Yeah, it's huge. Look, there's a lot to get through, and no, we haven't, but the crossbench seems to have, and that's something the Albanese government have decided upon. So that's a call for them. But there's a lot to get through. I mean, I think inside a party, it's a little bit easier because there are things that that the party takes a position on, and and of course we're entitled to cross the floor on bits and pieces, but it's very, very difficult for the crossbench, I think, to be across that much information. And we all know the devil's in the detail. I mean, the Climate Change Bill 2022, which we might talk about later, is the very definition of that. The detail is everything.
Absolutely. And look, you've been doing some phenomenal work. You've been hammering them in the Parliament. It's often been an empty Parliament, but the people out there have been hearing you. You've been reaching millions of people in terms of the amount of views of these videos if you collect them together. And I wanted to start on this, one of the most important topics I think that you've been touching on, not many people have been talking about. Full credit to Alan Jones. You appeared on his show around about the 22nd of July, and you're talking about the digital identity bill, namely the Trusted Digital Identity Bill, where you said it will lay the foundation for a government-controlled central information database for every Australian. This can lead to a social credit style system and a system which will forever change the fabric of society. Why is this important to Australians?
Yeah, I think it's really important to Australians. I mean, as you say, it's called the Trusted Digital Identity Bill, which should, make sure everyone's comfortable then that it's trusted. We don't know who it's trusted by, but
yeah,
it's the naming always gives it away. It's I always say it's a bit like the People's Democratic Republic of, that you can tell the least democratic countries by that sort of title. But look, this is a pretty important piece of legislation. It was actually started under the Liberal government, the Morrison government, and the question keeps getting asked: who asked for this? Why did anyone want this? And the rationale for it is really a centralised government database or digital ID, which is designed to kind of cover the cracks of the various MyGov different government agencies. So it's pitched as a new way of creating a single one-stop identity for Australians, but these things never stay where they start. We're told it's voluntary at the moment, but the truth is we were told that about COVID as well. We were told about voluntary therapies in COVID, and of course things become mandated very quickly. So you can well imagine this is a similar situation here, whereby it starts off that if you'd like to opt into this system, you get a digital identity. It starts collating data about you and being able to make sure you can access government websites, and then pretty soon the private sector picks it up, and then pretty soon you can't actually get a bank loan without having a digital ID, and all of a sudden it becomes almost impossible to live without a digital ID. And then the next question becomes, what is actually going to be the purpose of this? Like, we've seen what happened in Canada with the truckers getting, bank accounts frozen. We've seen all sorts of, instances here with QR codes and, this sort of social credit style system. But, does this lend itself to a future whereby this becomes a giant hoover for information and people's, data preferences and, medical history and voting records and whatever? Now, a lot of this might not happen, but we don't know. And once the building blocks are there, it becomes all too easy, I think, for government and private sector to trade and share that information. And all for what? For the sake of safety and convenience. I mean, I think we're too quick to just dismiss this as being a sort of a benign little event and a government platform. I got some real concerns about this. I think this has the very real risk of setting the framework for a social credit style system. This may well be, with all the other things that are going on, the beginnings of the ability to shut people down if they don't comply.
I think you'd probably agree and hear this from your constituents. Trust in the government, trust in our institutions is at a record low. The universities, the mainstream media, or the corporate media, as I like to call them, no one trusts anyone that's coming out. And I did an interview with George Christensen where he made the point about the health passports where people could digitally have their health record on there. He was promised, and government members were promised, that this information wouldn't be given to the states and used by the states to actually get people fired. George Christensen, former member of parliament for the Nationals, he went as far to say that they lied to him about that use of that information. So, I mean, we can sort of see why people are very, upset about, the suggestion of digital identity, something that might actually integrate your health information as well as your ability to pay for and pay your bills. Is that what you're hearing from your constituents on this particular topic?
Yeah, I hear a lot of it. There's a lot of concern out there about all of those things. I mean, you only have to look back to the example in South Australia where we had in the last 12 to 18 months during the COVID period, we had the home quarantine app, which was touted as being revolutionary, one of the first of its kind, and what a great thing is this. And this was a piece of software that sat on your phone that rather than you getting put into some sort of quarantine in a medi hotel, you were able to the privilege of staying in your own home. Yeah. Whereby the payoff for that was using this system which took a photo of you and relayed your GPS data, and if you didn't answer that call at the right time, then you got a knock on the door from the police, which, I mean, sounded awful to me. It sounded like an absolute, dystopian nightmare, the sort of thing you'd get out of, Xinjiang or somewhere like that. But, we saw it in other instances too. We were told that the QR code data wouldn't go missing, and it did. It went missing in Victoria. It got missing here, there, and everywhere. So you can't, nobody in their right mind can ever actually say that they trust government departments, because the reality is they're fallible. And you can imagine this centralized database for information. I mean, this is going to be the greatest target for hackers you have ever seen, and they will get it. They will get the information, and that's just the way it is. We've seen, once again, hacks all over the country on government databases. This is the sort of information that potentially gets collated that no authoritarian dictatorship could ever have dreamed about. And those who trust institutions, I think these days are very, very few and far between, or just foolish.
Absolutely, and I mean, I've thrown a cartoon up of Foreign Minister Penny Wong meeting with the Foreign Minister of China, and I mean, we've seen some hacks originating from China, whether or not they were from the state actor itself. I don't know. I've probably got to ask Senator Patterson about that one. He was on that, but I do believe, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're on the warpath right now with China. We're on a collision course with regards to the Taiwan Strait, and I'm really worried about the weaponization of our digital identity. Absolutely. But to make matters worse, Senator Antic, I mean, not only were you trying to raise the flag on this, particularly on Alan Jones' show on ADH TV, and they do some phenomenal work over there, but you were then fact-checked by, correct me if I'm wrong, the Australian Associated Press, the AAP.
Yeah, well, apparently. I mean, the question was asked about one of the comments that was made in the form of a fact check, and we all have varying degree of views about fact checks and what their intent is and what they are. And I went back and had a look, of course, and there was I guess a theme to the fact checks. They never seem to to touch on one side of the political fence. They always seem to touch on the other. And so yeah, look, I mean, I think this is just the way of life at the moment in politics. I mean, these corporate media arms, they come armed with a message in many instances, and it's very hard to resist. And I think people are skeptical about fact checks, whether it's Media Watch on the ABC or or the many that are sort of floating around on the internet. I think people have become a bit cynical.
Yeah, absolutely. And you ended up responding to them in the form of your own media release. And yeah, you did make that point. You said that, hang on a sec, why is it that you're only fact-checking right-wing stuff and their opinions on those two topics, climate change and COVID? I mean, it's when was the last time a left-wing channel on Facebook got deranked, shadow banned because of their views or overselling the jab? You don't see that happen. Correct me if I'm wrong, the AAP, they'll probably write a fact check about this. But guys, who are the AAP? I've done an explanation about this in late 2020. They have written probably 5 fact checks, particularly for me, to downrank my content over the last 2 years. What they do is they are contracted by Facebook. They are certified to write these fact checks where they look at your content. You could say 100 things right, but if you say one thing wrong, they will grab that one thing, they will put it across experts, and you might genuinely be wrong. And then they will actually fact check it on the slightest inaccuracy, slightest number wrong, and then they will use that article, Facebook will use that article to downrank your content, to limit your exposure to new audiences, and to really cordon you. So you could have a page of some 100,000 people, and you're usually cracking, hundreds of thousands of views in videos, and then all of a sudden you can't even crack 3,000 views. That's something I've experienced a number of times. I've seen Craig Kelly's page get smashed and deleted. I've seen Ricardo Bosie's get smashed. Turning Point has been had a fact check written about us recently, and it's happened with you, Senator Antic. And there's nothing that enrages me more than censorship. It really does, because if you can't make an argument, then what's the point? I mean, it doesn't matter if you have the best arguments in the world. What can we do to solve this? And I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great question, because ultimately this is a big problem for social media. It's a big problem for the future of our democracy. We used to have a very limited scope of media in this country. It was newspapers, TV, and radio, and they were all controlled to the best ability they can in terms of censorship by regulation, legal, legislation, the media ownership laws. That world is just blown away now, because these are all international companies with holdings in different offshore locations, and so it's a very difficult beast to control now. And you've got, I guess, so much power in such small hands, and all it takes is an editorial line to drift into this group, big tech and others, for it to become very, very persuasive. And I think we are seeing that. I mean, I've in recent times had the greatest of suspicions, and we'd never know the actual answer to this, but it's pretty clear to me that things have been getting downranked. And in fact, that interview with ADH with Alan Jones was one of them that I was pretty sure was shadow banned. It was just getting zero traction, and maybe they didn't like what I was saying, but the reality is it's happening and it's out there. And what I would really like to see is more transparency on this, because it's so important to the democracy. I moved last year for a Senate Select Committee on this very issue to look into all these issues, to try and have that set up, and it missed out. It missed out by one vote in the end. And unfortunately, if that had got up, we'd now be well and truly into the position of having these executives before the Senate, asking them all these questions to provide documents potentially about shadow banning and all these things. And I just think it's something we're not paying enough attention to in this building, because I think it doesn't take much for a change in ownership for the pendulum to swing from one side of politics to the other, by the way. I mean, the point of media ownership laws was always that it remain as impartial as it can. And that's good for democracy. And you're right, censorship, I know that free speech has to ultimately be a finite concept. You can't have people walking around, making death threats or whatever it may be. It's got to be a finite position. But what we're seeing at the moment, I think, goes well beyond that. I think there are opinions that are suitable and there are opinions which are not suitable, and that generally is a problem. Genuinely is a problem.
People often ask me, what can I do? I mean, a lot of politicians, they ask me for my opinion on how to not get censored as much. And the conclusion I've sort of come to is, well, guys, this isn't a problem from Australia. This is an American exported problem. Like we're really, and I hate this because it goes against every fiber of my being. I believe in the classic Jordan Peterson, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and try and beat this thing. But genuinely, in America, they have exported this and they need to fix it. They really do. Whether that's in the form of someone similar to Elon Musk picking up the baton on one of the platforms and setting a higher standard so that they're appealing to 100% of the country rather than just 50% being the lefties. I don't know. But what we could potentially do is pass legislation, but maybe they just pull the plug like they did with the media bargaining code.
That's exactly right. And of course, we saw the power of this with the Parler experience, didn't we, at the end of the American elections, when Parler was developing a following of its own, and it was pulled from the Apple store, and then it was pulled from Google, and then ultimately Amazon web hosting pulled it from there. I mean, the ability for these companies to move as a pack and deplatform is extraordinary, and we certainly have never seen anything like it. I don't think there are any answers yet, and I just wonder right at this moment whether there's any impetus for it as well in the US. It doesn't feel like it at the moment.
Yeah, it's absolutely astonishing. So, guys, look, I've already flashed it once already. If you have the opportunity, if you're really eager to see what Senator Antic is putting up, please go join his actual mailing list. He did a post after this saying that he's being censored. So please go join his mailing list at alexantic.com.au/join. That's www.alexantic.com.au. It's on the screen /join. Screenshot that, join it. Make sure you follow exactly what he's doing there. They can't get the emails. That's the best way for you to find out where he's at. Alex, is there anywhere else you're on, Facebook or?
Yeah, look, I've actually avoided Twitter, I have to say. Twitter's a bit of a, Twitter's a swamp, it's a sewer. I mean, what is the point? So yeah. I don't really go into there. I've got a Getter account, which is the sort of the fallback, but it's largely repetitive of Facebook. And look, I think, like all of us, we're hoping that there'll be an alternative which gets some ahead of steam. I mean, the Twitter stuff was very hopeful, but we'll see where that ends up. Of course, Elon Musk's in the courts now. And who knows where that ends up. But in the meantime, look, I think the best thing people can do is as you say, is to sign up, and follow us by email. And we send out regular updates, and that's the sort of the foolproof way of doing it. And we're all expecting at some point that we'll go to Facebook jail or get cast off or banned or whatever it is. And and I think this is the stopgap until we find a better platform.
Absolutely. And I do want to ask you about this final topic before we wrap up this interview. It just seems as though we're just continually going through all of these different crises. We had the mask wearing, we had COVID mania, we had everyone supporting Ukraine, and you had an excellent segment with Corey Bernardi about that this week. And then it just seems as though we're also supporting sort of Disney and the mainstream media and the mainstream pop culture narrative. I mean, what is going on in society? I mean, is it all falling apart? Is this the fall of Rome we're witnessing?
It does feel like that. I mean, there's a whole lot of people, and people will work this out eventually. People will look back on it, and of course, history is always written by the victors. So we'll see where that lands. But it is weird, isn't it? I mean, I heard someone say, the other day that there was this sort of concept once upon a time that Big Pharma, for example, was the devil to the left, and now they're the savior. And you see the same thing with, as you say, with the corporate media and corporates generally. I think, just today I heard the Greens in the chamber here talking about, our side of politics being in bed with big corporates, and I thought, wow, it's not the big corporates I know. This ESG stuff that's out there is not where I sit. I can tell you, my side of politics, the politics that I'm interested in is the Menzies style of the Liberal Party, where they were really talking about the forgotten people in the middle. It wasn't big corporates and it wasn't organised labour. It was the kind of the mum and dads and the shop owners and that sort of thing. So, politics is a funny business. Things do have a pendulous effect. I'm really hopeful one day that, the message will get through to the kids. They always say that conservatism is going to become the new counterculture. And when people, when kids are sort of growing up, they always want to do the opposite of their parents. So let's hope that's the case here, because we need it quickly.
No, absolutely 100%. And I think that they are coming up conservative. I'm very excited to actually see where things go into the future for Turning Point, because we are actually going to be starting to lurch into the universities and establish courses, not courses there, but actually events. That's the Parliamentary Bell. Right on time. Senator Antic, I want to thank you so much for your time.
How's the timing, Joel?
Yeah, it's like Joel and the interview. I bet you your staff are there. They actually have a false one when they want to kill the interview.
We should do that. If I was smarter, I would have come up with that myself. But.
No, you'll get fact checked, and then they'll de-rank your content. Alex, thank you so much. Please, if you're listening, guys, give it a share, get it out there, and please remember, if you want to support conversations like this, we keep them free and fair by your donation. So thank you all so much. Senator Antic, do you have anything to leave the audience with?
No, look, thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me. Keep up the great work. And, I think people have just got to keep the faith and keep speaking the truth. And we'll keep doing the same in Parliament here and hang in there.
Awesome. I'll see you later. Thanks so much for hanging around.
Good on you.
Cheers.
Thanks for that.